Welcome to This Week in Habsland. We are Jordan and Brian, and we are here tonight, the night of the 2024 NHL Entry Draft's first round, reacting to many of the picks in the top 5 and obviously that of the Montreal Canadiens. Should say it's 7:33 p.m. Eastern Time right now. We are picking our jaws up off the ground, Brian, because Beckett Seneca just got taken 3rd overall. So obviously the Habs pick is coming, and we're going to get to it. And obviously that's going to be the focus today. But we figured we'd have some fun and start a bit early, talk about what happened at number 2, obviously with Levshunov going to Chicago. But we got to start with Beckett Seneca, because as his quite literal reaction, where he looks to his father and says, "What the F?"
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Incredible. I must have been too low on him, Jordan. I think millions of people were too low on Beckett Seneca based on him going 3rd overall, including himself, because he also had to pick his jaw up off the floor. But based on that playoff performance, if you want to take a flyer on a guy with this amount of skill, those unbelievable hands, he's got really good size, who might argue?
It's actually kind of funny because the last player like this, well, maybe not the growth spurt angle, but lanky, forward, late riser, 3rd overall.
Oh my gosh.
Jesperi Kotkaniemi.
So I guess the Ducks are hoping that they have better luck.
And I think they will. I think we talked about Seneca. We came around on him. It took us a while for, maybe we were kind of like late lottery. And I think at the end, I forget where exactly we settled on, but it was somewhere between 8 to 10. And they just keep showing the replay of Seneca, Beckett and his parents kind of reacting to it. And they are completely shocked. The rumors all day were about Zeev Buium, which this podcast's Twitter account called in the morning, the moment those reports came out, and saying complete smokescreen.
Right.
The Buium stuff is all smokescreen from Anaheim. Pat Verbeek is trying to Jedi mind trick people and make people overthink it and create leverage. The Seneca stuff really only started popping up maybe an hour and a half before the draft. I think Dave Pagnotta probably had it first. But yeah,
Well, if you're not talking speculation, it was an hour and a half before the draft. Because one guy got it right once again. Grant McCagg.
Got to give him props 3 years in a row.
He has a crystal ball in that mustache. I don't know how he does it, but
I will say, we give him props again, rightfully so. He did have Dalibor Dvorsky, I believe, as a top 3 prospect as well last season. In terms of how that's going to turn out, we'll see, but he did end up going towards the outskirts of the top 10, Dvorsky. Right. So he doesn't get everything right, but he had the Slav pick obviously 2 years ago. He said months ago, Seneca going top 3. He thinks it's going to happen. Obviously the Reinbacher stuff as well. So very interesting with what's happened there. Let's take a step back and also talk about Levshunov.
Yes.
Going number 2 to Chicago, not necessarily a shock at all. This is something I think most people had kind of keyed in on, that they were going to seemingly decide between Demidov and Levshunov, and Levshunov I think he had the advantage basically for the past 6 weeks or so. And that was reflected in our last episode where we said about 60% chance it was going to be Artem Levshunov going. What are your thoughts on Chicago actually pulling through, picking Levshunov, a player who it seems like most boards had maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th, or even lower for some people?
I had him at 4. You had him
eventually I got him to 4.
Yeah, but you had him higher earlier on, and I suppose you were right. But you're looking at the best defenseman in this draft class in multiple ways. He's amazing on offense. His activations are timely and effective. He's terrific in the defensive zone. He's physical and bruising. You don't want to be in front of the net when Levshunov's defending you. So they got a great one here. But like I said, by far the best defenseman in this draft, in my opinion. And there's a bunch of really good ones, because we're going to see several go in the top 10.
Yeah, I still think that's on the table, that we're going to get 5 or 6 defensemen go inside the top 10.
We're about to see who the Jackets are taking. From the Medicine Hat Tigers, Caden Lindstrom.
So this was, we saw this happening. Yeah. This too, the smoke screens from Anaheim at 3 were pretty obvious all day. Who they were going to take, I would say they successfully did that. No one, even Beckett Seneca, didn't know. But the Buium stuff was it was kind of obvious. Lindstrom going 4 seemed more and more likely over the past couple days. There was a report, I believe, from Anthony Martineau, who remains the best Habs insider, that the Canadiens did in fact meet with Lindstrom recently, but it was very cordial.
Yeah.
And that to me read as they don't think he's going to make it past 4. There is at least, I would assume, a promise from Columbus to take him at 4. That's what happened. We love this guy. This is the very first player, non-Celebrini division that we brought up maybe 5 or 6 months ago. And despite the injury stuff, which looks like teams got a little bit looser with that information this week, and it seemed like, oh no, he's still going to go top 4, top 5. There was the rumor about Philadelphia trying to trade up from their spot, I believe, at 13 up to 4. So he still goes 4. So clearly people aren't worried about the injury that he had throughout the season, about it being a long-term thing. What are your thoughts on Caden Lindstrom going forth?
The 1-2 punch of Caden Lindstrom and Adam Fantilli as the centerman for the Columbus Blue Jackets is scary.
Yeah.
That is absolutely scary. They're going to be so good. What I love about Lindstrom the most, his transition game was so darn effective. I said it a bunch of times. He had the best ability to get over the blue line in the offensive zone of anybody in his league. So that just a phenomenal zone entry specialist who also in the offensive zone cuts to the front of the net and will just attack, take shots, try and score. He does have a very, very good shot as well. They got a great one. This was a guy that I absolutely wanted in the 5 spot potentially. He went 4, so not available. And then we're going to have to start thinking about the decision that's going to be made. But this to say, like a play driving center of this level rarely goes at 4. I think usually they're the first overall pick.
I do maintain if he doesn't get injured, he's going no lower than 2.
Yeah.
I'm sure Chicago, given him a full season, a healthy bill of health, he would be going 2, not Levshunov. But he goes to 4. He's a guy who's going to need a lot more development time. Like, I would not be surprised, despite being a 4th overall pick and being physically mature, still needing 2 more years in the CHL. Unfortunately for him, because he's a CHL player, he can't make the jump to the AHL. He might be like kind of an ideal D+2.
Yeah.
Second year after your draft, go to the AHL because he's so physically mature. But it might not be a bad thing for him to stay in the WHL, have some deep playoff runs. He's going to be playing with Andrew Basha. He's going to be playing with Gavin McKenna. Stay with that team. Take his time to develop. It's going to be a long development curve. And as long as he stays healthy, then at 4, this might be a pick that you look back on in 5 or 6 years and say, how in the heck did we overthink it? We being obviously Chicago and Anaheim, and not take the 6'4", smart and physical centerman that is Caden Lindstrom.
He's so good in all facets and a fearless player who will go into any situation. I think when we discussed him last, your one sort of concern, and many people's concern, I guess, is whether he'll pan out as a center, because his, I suppose, playmaking was always secondary to his want to cut towards the net and take a shot. But what I said and what I still believe is that with his brain, his high hockey IQ, I don't see it being a problem because it's just one more thing he's going to learn. And on the topic of him returning to junior, he's just going to learn how to be a star there. Because he put up very, very good numbers this year, but didn't play more than 32 games. He played 32 games this year, and that wasn't enough to, I think, really jump off the charts in terms of scoring multiple goals a game and just being an all-around star in his league. And he has the potential to be that in the NHL. So I will say I really like the players that have been announcing the picks so far. Jumbo Joe and the crazy Sharks fan in the stands who's had 1 too many
instantly,
or 3 too many.
Meme god. Yeah. Instantly the most memorable part of this entire weekend.
And everybody who's upset about it, you don't get it.
No.
It's hilarious. It's awesome. That's how every Sharks fan feels inside about getting Celebrini with their first overall pick. And now Celine Dion here to make the pick for the Montreal Canadiens, the first non-player to make that pick.
Yeah. So
that's a great one.
Bedard was there. He looked like he absolutely hated his life.
I don't know. I just think he operates on such a high frequency on the ice that his pulse, his heartbeat is at such a low pace that he's just so calm no matter what he's doing. He's live in front of thousands of people and it doesn't affect him.
And then you had obviously Scott Niedermayer for the Anaheim Ducks.
Legend.
And then Rick Nash.
Yeah, also legend.
So yeah, having Celine is actually a really nice touch considering the Vegas and Montreal overlaps here. Okay, so
they did it.
With the 5th pick, the Canadiens have picked Ivan Demidov. And Brian, just what are your thoughts? You're in a state of shock right now. Celine just said Ivan Demidov, and I think there was definitely some gasps there in the crowd. I think everyone in Montreal it's not even a quiet fist bump right now. This is the guy. This is the guy that was ranked number 2 for a good chunk of the year. Once Yzerman kind of made his way out of the top 5, top 10 discussion, Demidov was the guy that rose to the number 2 spot. A lot of people really liked him. They couldn't put him over Celebrini, but many really did think this guy is going to be very special. What are your thoughts right now? I'm dying to hear it.
I have 5 words.
Yeah.
My heart will go on.
There it is.
Nice little Celine Dion shout out. But I'm absolutely floored, partially because of all the Bouillon smokescreen, which another smokescreen. I called this one. I am floored. I'm so excited about Ivan Demidov. I had him in the 2 spot.
Yeah.
Most analysts, I think, had him in the 2 spot.
Yep.
He is absolutely filthy. His vision and creativity are brilliant. He's going to be so exceptional with the Montreal Canadiens with their offensive style. I am just absolutely floored, Jordan. I can't even express it.
So they did it. They drafted a talented forward, which we were having the discussion right before we started. If Demidov is drafted, is he the most talented forward on the Montreal Canadiens since Alex Kovalev? And you asked me that, and I answered with a resounding yes.
You even said maybe prior to Kovalev.
It might be. You might want to keep going further back. I mean, I recognize how skilled Juraj Slafkovsky and Nick Suzuki are. Pacioretty was more of just a pure goal scorer, didn't have anywhere near the dangles that Demidov has. And then, you have to go all the way back. Camilleri didn't have it. Giunta didn't have it. Kovalev's the guy. The big difference here, and look, I know he's Russian Montreal. When Montrealers think of talented Russian forwards, we're always going to think of Kovalev. One huge difference here is to compete with this guy, Kovalev. I loved him. The nickname Russian Volcano was very apt because half the time he was dormant and the other half he would explode. And even that's being a little nice probably. Demidov is a complete 200-foot player. He will, not saying he's a stalwart on the defensive end, but he's good enough. And he competes from one end of the ice to the other. I already mentioned it briefly. Best hands in the draft.
Unbelievable puck handling skill. He was ranked 8.5 by Elite Prospects in their draft guide, which you rarely see anybody above 8. Just incredibly dynamic. He is able to cut to the inside at any given time in a hockey game, where is the opposition going to defend the hardest? In front of their net. And he routinely Patrick Kane's his way through an entire defensive unit right in front of their net, like they're stationary pucks in a practice drill. And then he'll deke the goalie and put the puck in himself, or he'll draw 3 guys towards him and then pass to somebody who he just freed up. I said this a few podcasts ago with almost like disbelief that it would happen, thinking of how cool it'll be for either Slafkovsky or Suzuki or Doc or Caulfield especially to have an extra second with the puck every single time Demidov passes it to them, because he will have drawn defenders towards him. And that's exactly what I think we're going to see with him. Yeah,
so let's keep talking about the player, because I'm dying to get into fit and who he's going to play with. And oh my, the top 6 now is, there's one more guy to it, right? So let's keep talking about the player. You mentioned how he has a really good habit of cutting inside, and for a player that was once believed to be undersized, and again, we've had the discussions, he's fine. He's 6 foot, 190. There's no undersized issue with him there. It's how he's willing to go play, cut inside, then move out, find the space. There's a lot of talk about like his skating not being the best, but I think what's important to note is, so he has this kind of not unique skating style, and it's not the part of the skating style that gets criticized, right? The part where he gets criticized is the fact that he pushes off his inside edges, when usually you do it with your outside edges. It would be that the more interesting part, I think, is he has like a 10-2 style, where you'll see Crosby do this, you'll see all the talented players do this, and you'll see it actually quite a lot, I'll say, from defensemen at the blue line, when they kind of and this is just basically, it's an open stance. You just look at your feet and your left foot goes to 10 o'clock, your right foot goes to 2 o'clock. He does it so efficiently, not at the offensive blue line, but down near the net and around in that area, where it's so much harder to do that. And I recognize that he's playing on international ice, and it's a bigger, and I can't recall if the team he was playing on Russia was playing on a hybrid ice style, but it was definitely bigger than what we're going to have he's going to play with in the NHL. But his ability to maneuver with his skating in tight spaces, because this is where the criticism is, right? His skating's not great. I don't know if he'll have the ability to separate in transition. But I think in the offensive zone, when it's already set, when it's a cycle chance, I don't think I have any worries really about his skating. Again, not saying it's going to be the greatest skating we've ever seen in the offensive zone, but it's much less of a factor for cycle chances.
Of course.
And what do we say when we're going to get into like the lineup combos? If he's playing with Slavkovsky, it's going to be nothing but cycle chances.
Oh my God.
So in terms of the skating, because again, that's the one piece of criticism you could levy at him. I think off the rush, you might be able to make a legitimate argument about it. And he's an 18-year-old. He's going to get better. Offensively, that 10-2 style, again, we just watched the playoffs. Like when there's a bit of space and you can do that and you can kind of almost like shimmy your way around a situation, it is extremely valuable.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out because that's something I don't think we got into when we did the scouting report on him.
Yeah.
That like 10-2 style, but he uses it at the right point. He doesn't use it just for the sake of doing it, right? He uses it with intent.
Yeah. And that's crucial, right? Because when you have average acceleration, average top speed, you have to be able to use your skating in another way. And this is the other way that he uses it with that open style. It doesn't matter if your speed is bad if the defender's already in the complete wrong position because you fooled them with your high hockey sense and your deception. So you don't have to beat them in a foot race. So that's what's great about him. On the topic of the transition game, so that lack of speed, if you can even call it that, the average speed, let's say for a fifth overall pick.
And as we're seeing here, just pausing for a moment, again, very much doing this in real time, Teaser Ginla has gone 6th overall, so we're not getting the run on defenseman.
No.
Which is very interesting to see.
Well, he's going where I thought he would go. I had Ginla going 6.
Right, so we're seeing some of the defensemen starting to fall in the draft, which is quite interesting. We're calling them Montreal as the 21 pick. And
I feel a little vindicated saying that Levshinov is by far the best defenseman in this draft. If there's this many forwards in between, like they felt the same way. So back to the transition discussion about Demidov, I do think, and I suppose we can reserve this for the talk about fit, but Slavkovsky's great in transition. Suzuki's amazing in transition. Doc, we saw glimpses of it 2 seasons ago. Last season, we barely saw him, unfortunately, but he's going to be with 1 or 2 of those guys. So he doesn't have to do all of the work in the transition. He can be the offensive genius that he is purely in the offensive zone. And the thing about the Montreal Canadiens right now that I've sort of lamented about for years is the fact that a lot of their chances are produced off the rush and they don't hem other teams in their zone enough. And Suzuki and Slavkovsky being on the same line helped that a lot. They both chase, they both fight, they're both able to keep the opposition in. And so having Demidov added to that just about 30 levels higher than it was before, because not only are you going to hem the opposition in, but you're going to start to see critical decisions being made to attack the net. And so it's one thing to keep the puck in the offensive zone. It's another to, at the exact right moment, make the right decision to attack the net and get chances because of this. And do you want to start talking about fit? Do you want to keep talking about player? Because
I think we can start jumping into fit. And I want to ask you kind of a series of questions here.
Sure.
So is he their best prospect? Does he jump ahead of Ryan Backer-Hudson?
Yeah. I say yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously he's quite immediately the best forward prospect, not even a discussion. I tend to agree with you. I think it's a pretty easy call to put him ahead of them. Okay. So there's 1 year left on the contract. We should say he's going to play likely, we're hoping, in the KHL this upcoming season as D+1 and then make his way over to the Canadiens in a year, whether that is going to be in the AHL or whether, I mean, he'll have already played pro hockey, might as well at this point make his way straight to the NHL for his D+2 season. Yeah. But we get to that D+2 season. 19, 20-year-old Ivan Demidov. Yeah, let's talk about fit because this is where we're at with the Montreal Canadiens. This was always going to be the biggest day of the season. It's the easiest way to acquire skill is through the top of the draft. Trades are very hard to pull off. You have to do them, as we've seen with the Florida Panthers, who, you know, with winning a Stanley Cup, we've seen it with the Vegas Golden Knights. Like, you win cups by doing, you can do it through trade, you can do it through draft, and you can do it through free agency. For the Canadiens, for where they are right now, it's through the draft. So with that, they made the decision, unlike last year, to get a highly skilled forward. We've talked about it, right? The top 6 and the top 9, I think more broadly, that we were very confident in 3 of them, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, and Caulfield. Doc has to have a question mark at this point because of the injury stuff. Course. And then it's just like maybes.
Yeah.
Josh Roy is a maybe. Owen Beck is a maybe. Newhook is a maybe. Newhook at least is in the top. I'm very willing to say Newhook can be in the top 9.
Yes, for sure.
So
but
now
6 is another.
Whether
another
that's a
story.
top 9 on a Stanley Cup winning team, I'm open to discussing that. But those are were the other 3 guys. So even then, that's only 7.
Yeah.
And with 4 of those 7 having question marks, Ivan Demidov comes in, and as of right now, I mean, it'll have to be a question mark in theory because he has to prove it first, but he is the most sure thing the Canadiens have had to a top 6 forward in a draft in the longest time. Like,
well, Slavkovsky.
well, no, I was leading into that. Like, I think in terms of a prospect, he's a better prospect than Slavkovsky.
Yeah. You know what? That's totally fair. He, in terms of his skill set, he's more developed than Slavkovsky was at age 18. That's definite. And I think Slavkovsky, you were betting on his ceiling. The irony being that with Demidov, you're still betting on his ceiling because his unbelievable skill could be just the tip of the iceberg.
I mean, look, I guess you could be a toss-up, but I would still rate like draft year Demidov above draft year Slavkovsky. The good news is they're on the same team now, so we don't have to do that. What's the lineup in 2026?
So you know how much I love the top line of Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Caulfield.
Yeah.
This pick might make me jump to your side, Jordan, and have Demidov now with Slavkovsky and Suzuki, Caulfield, Doc, and one of Roy, Newhook, or somebody that they might sign next year.
Somebody else, yeah.
Trade for within the next minutes, potentially. Who knows? He might be... Hughes is always cooking something, it seems. So Yakimchuk goes 7. Sorry to cut that thought off, but Yakimchuk going 7 to the Ottawa Senators. Another riser. He was not in our top defenseman discussion until last week, I believe, when you brought him up for like the very first time.
Yeah, he was kind of like, I viewed him outside of the top 10. I recognize that based on his playing style, he is someone that GMs might gravitate towards, hard-hitting defensive defenseman. So not overly surprising that he went there. Kind of surprised they passed on Dickinson. I thought that would have been a better fit. If you're giving the Senators truth serum, I think they thought that Beckett Seneca would be available at this pick. I'm going to guess that's what they would have preferred. But
Okay.
Yeah, no, interesting stuff. Yakimchuk being the second defenseman taken off the board.
Yeah, that's it. And the second right-handed defenseman. So once again, going to my mantra of right-handed defensemen have more value than left-handed defensemen. So although he is great defensively, he also has a ridiculous shot too. That can't be understated. So the Ottawa Senators getting better in net this week through a trade, and now getting better from the blue line, picking Yakimchuk. I mean, that'll take a few years for his development curve to kick in for him to be an NHL player. But our rivals to the west, slightly to the west, getting better, it seems.
Yeah. So anyways, this will just keep happening as each of the picks come in. These are players that we've been focusing on for the last 2-3 months. So it's interesting to see how it's all shaping up and seeing who is dropping, and if Ken Hughes will be able to do anything with that 21 pick. Back to the lineup machinations. Yeah, you know me. I'm a sucker for Doc and Caulfield being on a line together. I think this opens up so many opportunities here. And one of them is you can keep the first line together, because I think Demidov is a really good running mate to have with Kirby Dach. Kirby Dach is a possession monster.
Yeah, and a play driver.
And then you give him the skill of Ivan Demidov as one of his wingers. And all of a sudden, it's Doc does the work to get into the zone and stay in the zone, and Demidov finds everybody and can set people up and has a really good shot. So I think there's so many options now. So as someone who has been very much, keep Suzuki and Slavkovsky together, and then let's have Doc and Caulfield together, mostly because like I'm like mining for skill, right? Yeah. I'm trying my hardest to be like, how can I get as much as possible out of these top 2 lines?
Of course.
And recognizing from what we've seen on the ice the last 2 years, Doc and Slav are the 2 big play drivers in the top 6.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, well, like I got to somehow stretch this out as much as possible, right? Enter Ivan Demidov to the conversation, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, you know what? Like Doc and Caulfield, maybe we don't need it anymore.
Isn't that funny that with the same pick, I jump to your side and then you simultaneously jump to mine?
I mean, look, maybe part of it is because I think because of the success of the first line this past season, that's going to be de facto what they're going to start off with.
Well, also the fact that he's not coming over this year means they get another year of practice.
Right.
And I want to jump to one other thing, if that's cool, Jordan, where you said recently that if they don't draft Lindstrom or Demidov, they need to get, and they draft a forward, they still need to get another guy in their top 6. Whereas if they draft Demidov, it's less of an absolute need because this guy's going to be so formidable. I still believe they still need one guy. Like if they want to be Stanley Cup contenders, they still need a 6th guy. But it's so nice to know that they have 5 with the obvious asterisk or question mark on Kirby Dach, hoping that he's healthy and able to compete all 82 games this year, like his other centerman Nick Suzuki does.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about Oliver Kapanen as much as maybe other folks have, but him coming into the fold along with Owen Beck, at least professionally through Laval this year, will kind of reassure at a minimum the 4C spot going forward. And if one of the two of them work out as a third line center, then you're doing backflips, right? So through the center position, you think you're doing all right now from a skill perspective. Yeah, this was a conversation that we've had like in the lead up to this draft of, is it enough if they just draft one guy? Now, Demidov being that one guy is a pretty good, like, again, non-Celebrini division. This is by far and away the best forward.
Is this best case scenario, Jordan?
It is 100%. When the Habs had the number 5 pick, when we did our draft lottery review, we were sitting here thinking and saying, okay, like Tisha Ginla could be nice.
Yeah.
He could be a nice complimentary. Look, he ended up going 6th overall.
Yeah, so he will be great. Like, and you're not trying to say he's not.
No, Tisha's going to be a great hockey player, and he's going to work in the postseason, and I think that's so important and translatable. But importantly, we were thinking of Tisha Ginla as like a complementary piece of the top 6, as kind of like the final piece. Whereas with Demidov, who at that point I'm pretty sure we said, that's it, Bedard and Demidov, like, good luck, Central Division.
Yeah.
He's not going to be the complementary piece.
He's a focal point.
Him and Slav are going to be the 2 focal points.
Yeah.
Which, holy smokes, if you're Nick Suzuki all of a sudden, again, think all these alternate universes. If it is Dach and Caulfield, then that means the first line is Suzuki with Ivan Demidov and Yuri Slafkovsky. In which case, they're just never going to be in the defensive zone.
Yeah. And back on the topic of the other line configuration that you had before, so Dach with Demidov, I still do think that you need a sniper on that line if those are the two guys together, because neither one, I mean, Demidov does have a good shot. He can deke a goalie. He can score goals. There's no question about that. But a pure sniper would, I think, just complement that line beautifully, because Dach has the playmaking. Demidov has playmaking for days and just an amazing skill set, beautiful hands.
Yeah, as long as Dach comes back and is at the level that he was before, which like wasn't necessarily like an all-star level. Like he was a pretty good second line center.
Yeah, but that's what you need, I think, now. Like he doesn't have to be a world beater. He just has to, I think, vibe with these other guys in the top 6. So and he'll do fine.
Berkeley Catton just got picked 8th overall.
So not a drop like we were expecting. So other people are high on Catton as well. That's
so
nice to see.
Let's park our Demidov fantasies for a moment here, although now they are realities, and just kind of return to the draft as a whole. So this was not a defensive-heavy draft. Catton and Iginla did not fall, despite what was the rumblings for the past 10 days or so. And I think we can also close out, finally, our over-unders for the year, Brian. We went back and forth all season. You tallied it up at the end of the regular season. We were in a dead heat with 2 outstanding over-unders, one of which I kind of stupidly said, over 0.5 goaltenders to win the Conn Smythe.
Not stupidly. If
Bob was real close.
Didn't implode, I don't even know that he implodes so much as just Edmonton just got his number finally. They figured him out.
I will say I do think Barkov would have still gotten it. But anyways, so you took the lead in that. So the only way I could have tied it is if more than 4.5 defensemen got taken in the top 10. And with Berkeley Catton, good for him, going 8th overall, staying out in the West Coast, only a maximum of 4 defensemen can go in the top 10. So that'll be very interesting. Now remember, what was kind of interesting was the San Jose trade with Pittsburgh. With the Pittsburgh pick to flip with Buffalo.
Yes.
Move up from 14 to 11. And the general consensus was they were kind of worried that the top 6D were all going to be gone.
And now they won't be.
And
but they guaranteed it. They guaranteed it. I mean, I don't know why you make that trade beforehand. I mean, similar with the Habs one, you and I talked about it. I think the trade up from 26 to 21 is really more about, I think the Canadiens were just searching
forever for just anything, for options. And I think they found a partner in LA that was willing to get multiple picks, and the Habs want to consolidate. So it was just I think a good match. So that makes sense. Whereas I think very clearly the San Jose and Buffalo trade was San Jose freaking out that all the defensemen were going to be taken by the time they got to the 14th pick.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems unlikely that that's going to be the case at 11.
Hell, at 21, we might see a defenseman go for the Montreal Canadiens we were looking at. So we will absolutely see about that. But certainly that trade is a nice way to consolidate stuff lower down where we don't need more guys in the bottom 6 or the bottom pairing. We need more high upside guys. And at the difference between 21 and 25, you're moving up 4 spots. So that's 4 less guys that have gone. Your odds drastically increase. My guess is that Hughes and his scouts had a list of maybe, 6, 8, who's to say how many guys in that range that they felt like chances are most of these guys are gone at 20. I said 25. It's 26. So it's 5 picks apart. There's a list of a certain amount of guys that we want to get one of these guys, and chances are they're all gone at 26, and maybe at 21 they won't be. It could also be a means of jumping once to jump twice, and then they might be looking at Yzerman or a defenseman later on. Like now, Bouillon, Dickinson, Salayev.
So we'll see, right? We'll see with how this shapes up. We'll keep it posted. Just very interesting to see that the trend of the draft kind of going antithetical as to what the consensus was for the past year plus. So back to, again, the fact that Ivan Demidov is a Montreal Canadien and will likely be on the Habs sometime in the next 14 to 16 months. Now the outlook going forward on this team is, so one thing, again, kind of, I guess this happened with Reinbacher, but there's really no discussion about whether he plays on the Habs next year, which to me is kind of refreshing, at least, that we don't have to have the 18-year-old in the NHL conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm enjoying
that's
that.
a breath of fresh air.
There's no, so that's one advantage piece here. There's obviously a ton of other stuff in terms of contract extensions and potential trades, but there's no added value that Ivan Demidov is going to provide to the Montreal Canadiens in the 24-25 season, which likely could mean that the Habs might still be in the top 10 a year from now, right? So there will likely be another opportunity to add a highly skilled player next season. Tons of stuff still to be figured out, whether that pick is, whether it's 5th, whether it's 8th, whether it's 12th, whether it's 14th, likely somewhere in the back half of the lottery at this point. But this was the big swing. They finally did it. They opted to not do it last year because they believed David Reinbacher to be the best player available when they made their choice. And this year they turn it around and they pick the most talented forward that was on the board.
100%. And I think that, but when both of those guys hit their prime, Demidov, Reinbacher, this is going to be a scary team.
Yeah.
They've been systematically filling in gaps in the pseudo rebuild that had been started by the previous regime, and I think that they've assessed all of the issues, all of the holes in the proper order. We're now seeing that the Calgary Flames have drafted Zane Parekh, 9th overall, a dynamic offensive defenseman, another right-hand D. So that's all 3 of the defensemen picked in the top 9 so far, all right-handed defensemen. We have yet to see one of those highly touted smokescreen boys like Zeev Bouillon or
Salayev.
Anton Salayev. Yeah, exactly. Like,
so
where are they
Salayev's the big one. Like, let's get into it. Like
the big one, the tall one, the 6'7" one.
That too, quite literally. But Salayev was the guy who you looked at like the Bob McKenzie list versus, which again tends to lean more like what people are thinking versus LLE prospects list or Adobe prospects list. He was the biggest differentiator where he was showing up 3rd, 4th in a lot of these ones. And heck, man, like there was odds on him going, like I think the odds between him and Bouillon in the middle of the day on Friday going number 3 were about the same. Where Anton Salayev was the second most likely from a betting perspective to go number 3 overall. And now we're going to see if he even gets picked inside the top 10. That was one player that baffled me the entire draft process of what people saw with Salayev. I know he's gigantic. I know there's incredible upside if he puts it all together. And at a minimum, you have a guy who is a number 4 defenseman, a bigger Alexei Yemelin, really. But yeah, that was one that floored me. I mean, Zeev Bouillon falling, I think we can say it, right? Like Bouillon is indeed falling at this point.
Absolutely falling. Yeah, we predicted that it would be Catton who would have the biggest fall. We said we didn't know if Salayev, like going this late, for instance, would constitute a fall because he's sort of all over the place. But Bouillon, absolutely.
Which is Like I mean, I would say like Parekh going 9 is like right on the border of him falling. Like it's I had him at number 5. I think you had him at I think you also put him at 5 at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You were toying with putting him or Tish at the 5 spot.
Yeah.
So he's like right on the border of being falling. I do think we can definitely say like Boogeyman at this point has fallen. I don't know why that is. I mean, at the end of the day, Catton is the guy to me that is the most surprising after Seneca, obviously, of kind of going higher in the draft. And that just provided opportunity for like what we had assumed of like what is the top 12 of the 6 defensemen and the 6 forwards. So the 3 big forwards plus Catton, Seneca, and Iginla, and then the 6th defenseman that we've talked about. So far, all 9, that's the first 9 have been that. No one's jumped inside the top 12. It'll be interesting to see if someone does, and if that is the case, who falls outside of it. But what we can say so far is, it's the forwards have moved up and the defensemen have generally dropped.
Yep.
With the exception, of course, of Ivan Demidov.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the topic of Catton jumping, I don't even know that I would call it a jump. It's just that there's been this trend, the Benson trend, if you want to call it, of slightly smaller in the case of Benson, he was quite a bit smaller than Catton, but smaller forwards who depend a lot on rush offense, the way Catton does, dropping in the draft to the low teens.
Yeah.
And so it's very nice to see somebody taking a chance on Berkeley Catton, because I think absolutely this kid's going to be special, going to score a lot of goals off the rush, going to improve that rush offense like crazy. So that's a very exciting one. Okay, Jordan, I want to get back to Demidov. I want to get back to the Canadiens.
Of course.
More specifically, in like 2-3 years, maybe 4 years, wait till he's ready. How does this power play unit sound to you? Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Uri Slafkovsky, Lane Hudson, and now Ivan Demidov. So the guy who was there was Doc. Now he becomes your second power play unit center, which also that screams, lots of points on the power play. But that first unit could be so dangerous.
Right. So Demidov in Russia was playing on the left half wall, which is in theory the Caulfield spot.
But we saw some success of Caulfield in the bumper as well.
We saw some movement there.
Front. Yeah.
So like we could see how that moves around. I mean, hey, like I have no complaints from me on that. Like Hudson being there, I know people have toyed with the idea of having both Hudson and Mailloux, which I think is a kind of a little ridiculous, especially now that like, hey, there are options. You're right. If Kirby Doc is on the second wave of the power play, which I don't know if that's going to be the case. It'll be interesting to see. One of those guys has to be on the second
Doc
wave.
and Mailloux being the sort of, I guess, top 2 guys on that unit right now that we could talk about, and we're putting Matheson aside. I don't know if we should, but this is a draft day discussion, which oftentimes you're talking about the future of the franchise and the youngest guys, the guys between 18 and 25 in the case of Suzuki. So that's the only reason that we're putting him aside. But also I do think that Lane Hudson's potential to be a power play specialist is that of an elite power play specialist, whereas Matheson is just a very good one. So that's why this is so exciting. I would love to see, so there's the fastest skater competition. I want to see the walk the blue line with open skates battle between Hudson and Demidov.
So that's exactly
it's a fun comparable, right?
Yes,
like the open stance of walking the line.
It's the exact player I was thinking of earlier when I was describing the 10-2 stance of can we have a competition between Hudson and Demidov. And they can be on opposite sides of the ice, and we can make the Canadiens tend to do like a skills competition, open practice at some point in the season on like a Sunday morning. I think we can probably try to pull that together, because that is the exact player I was thinking about. And I should have brought it up then, of who does the 10-2 stance. It's Hudson when he walks the line on the power play.
Yeah.
And we're going to get used to that, whether it's in Montreal or Laval next year, or probably a little bit of both. That's going to be something we're going to take a look at. And then, so just here to kind of wrap up the top 10, Anton Salayev, New Jersey Devils, heard us talking. Salayev goes 10th overall, which I think is fair. I think I ended up having him 12th. I think you were kind of right.
I had him 11.
Right. So that's the fair range for him.
Yep.
I never bought the super big hype on him going 3rd or 4th. I get it. He's gigantic. I mean, looking at some of these highlights here, it literally looks like he's playing against children. But for the most part, like a stay-at-home left-handed defenseman with some offensive pop potential. So, that's going to be a huge development curve. Interesting, after all the noise that New Jersey brought about wanting to move the top 10 pick. And also, just like for the record now, that this is the 3rd year we've done the draft. every year we'd have discussions, and we were a part of it, where we talk about trading up and down inside the top 10. Another year has now gone by, Brian. No pick in the top 5 was traded, so that's now 16 straight drafts. And no pick inside the top 10 was traded, which it has happened, right? I think I had my notes had something along the lines of it's happened 7 or 8 times in the last 15 years. No top 10 picks moved.
Yep.
Now, 11 was moved, 14 was moved, 21's been moved, 26 has been moved, 25 has been moved with the Ullmark trade. A bunch of stuff has happened, but nothing inside the top 10. So despite the fact that we all waste so much oxygen.
Yeah, let's take a moment of silence for all the oxygen that was wasted talking about potential trades, because
look,
to nothing.
This is not us making fun of other people. We're part of the industrial complex here that talks about trades inside the top 10. Although I do think we caveat it fairly heavily about, hey, like, probably not going to happen inside the top, definitely not in the top 5.
Yeah,
and top 10 is less rare, maybe like once every 3 years we're looking at inside the top 10. So I think we'll wrap it there, Brian. I think any last thoughts on Ivan Demidov for now?
So, I mean, dare we talk? I mean, we talked about style. We talked about the NHL timeline, like how long it's going to take. We talked about the fit. Dare we talk about his floor and ceiling in terms of results?
That's great. Yeah, let's do that.
So, like, floor, in terms of his skill set, let's say, floor, he's a top 6 forward in the NHL, no question. But who cares about floor? Let's talk ceiling. That's way more fun.
In terms of floor, I think the fact that people got to see him in the last couple weeks, whether it was in the training session in Florida or even now at the draft, and they got to see how much bigger he is.
Yes.
I think
but I don't know if we said this. Sorry to cut you off, but like when it was announced, I was like, okay, yeah, there's no way he's falling to 5 now. He's big. That was literally the only question mark.
Yeah. It was just that and the skating, and we debunked the skating a little bit, I think, a little bit earlier.
That one's farfelu.
So, yeah, it's top 6, like a second line winger. I agree. It's probably his floor now, like a passable second line winger. But yeah, let's go upside. What's the upside?
I mean, ceiling. If he's as skilled and just keeps developing, if he's as skilled as we believe he's going to be, do we have the next 100-point Montreal Canadien?
He is. I'll say this. He is immediately has the best chance to do it. The only other person I'd put ahead of him would be Suzuki, because if he's on a line with him and Slav,
exactly right,
then Suzuki's picking up 65 assists.
And I mean, look, Suzuki could be the guy potting tons of goals, because you put Suzuki and Demidov, who are both very good playmakers and who just will feed Slavkovsky all the time, and as Slavkovsky develops, that great shot will get better. So do we have 3 100 points? I'm being greedy. I'm over the moon, Jordan, so I'm going to be a little bit greedy for a second. Look,
I think people should be happy. I know this time last year people were really getting on the Reinbacher pick, and you and I think rightfully so to a certain extent. We said it last year. We liked the player, we didn't love the pick. This year, we love the player. We love the pick. Both of us had him ranked number 2 overall.
And it kind of validates the Reinbacher pick last year in terms of filling in your holes. Like, you got the best defenseman in that draft by far. He was a right-hand shot, which you absolutely needed. And then the very next year, you get the other thing that you need, which is high-end skill. So absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so we'll wrap it up here, and we'll be back to discuss what else Ken Hughes is up to on draft night. Until then, go Habs.
I know we just wrapped the episode, but I just have to throw in how much better Demidov is going to make all the players around him. Oh, my God. Okay, that's all. Thanks for listening.